Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the More Than Macros podcast. Before we get started, remember our disclaimer. The information and opinions shared during this podcast are solely those of any given individual and not a substitute for medical advice. Well, as if you can see, you'll know I'm actually not alone, but Riki isn't here this week. I am pulling a Jason Derulo and flying kind of solo. Well, I guess he was riding solo, not flying. I thought that earlier, and I was like, damn, and it was so cheesy, but I still wanted to say it, but I messed it up anyway. But I am here with the D. It's Cashew now, right? You did change it. Formerly a D Zucker. So welcome, Adi. As many can probably figure, I typically talk a lot, but I don't ramble all this much, and I'm really nervous about this podcast. But thank you for joining.
Thank you for having me. You have no reason to be nervous. I'm probably equally as nervous.
Oh, well, that's good. My palms were sweating the whole drive home. So how are you tonight?
I'm good. I'm just hanging out in my room right now because my husband is doing a podcast out there, and so he needs quiet. So
nice.
I've been pushed in the bedroom.
Everybody's podcasting.
Yeah, exactly.
He's got it's Brute Strength podcast, right?
Right.
And
yes.
That's perfect. He comes out. I start my week with him because he usually comes out on Mondays. So
yeah, it does.
And Mondays are one of my worst commutes. So perfect. I highly, highly doubt there's anybody listening to this podcast that doesn't know you. But if they don't at least recognize your name, I'm sure they'll recognize Working Against Gravity or Team WAG. And you are the lady behind that excitement. Do you want to tell people a little bit, just kind of a quick overview about yourself?
About me, yeah. I am an entrepreneur by accident, I guess people call me. I started Working Against Gravity technically in September of 2014, and we incorporated in February of 2015. Okay. So it's been almost just over 2 years that we started working with clients. I used to be a competitive weightlifter. I don't necessarily compete as much anymore. I've dabbled in CrossFit. I actually won a medal at Senior Nationals this past year in Canada. And I pretty much get bored really easily. I've done every single sport you can possibly name under the sun. I've tried it all. I've never been exceptionally great at any of them, but above average at pretty much all of them. And I travel all over the country and love nature and love working against gravity.
That's awesome. So now you, if I'm not mistaken, you kind of, I guess, stepped away from weightlifting almost by default, not necessarily because you wanted to, just because, I guess, Working Against Gravity was picking up there, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we have almost 25 staff members now. Yeah. And we have over 2,000 active clients. We have a new company that's starting, which is building software. So it's just taken over my life. I mean, it's just way too big of a responsibility for me to focus on training. And then at the same time, I mean, I definitely have the time to be able to train that hard, but it's just the mental fortitude that you need to be successful in weightlifting. And I'm not necessarily training weightlifting for exercise and general well-being. I'm training to compete, and training for 3 hours alone in your garage when you're thinking about work the whole time is a lot harder than doing, 30-minute workout 3 times a week, high intensity, just to be fit and look good naked.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure Working Against Gravity has kind of taken on like a world of its own. Like, yeah. I mean, like we kind of talked about before we jumped on, you've been on a number of podcasts before. And what's been cool kind of for me, as somebody who kind of floats both sides of like actually doing macros, like I just said, week 2 check-in actually just went out this morning to Crosby. So a little shout out to Crosby. But I also obviously am on like the business side of a little bit behind the scenes, like with obviously this podcast and things like that. So I've listened to kind of you on the business podcast, like Barbell Business. So, and they've actually had you on twice, like one, I guess, when WAG was starting, and then recently, and kind of talking about the evolution.
Yeah, exactly. A year later.
Yeah. So, I mean, how has that changed your life in everyday life, aside from just kind of like, I guess aside from just kind of having to kind of put weightlifting and stuff like that aside, how have you been able to keep up with the fact that it has kind of evolved so quickly?
I don't know if I'm really good at it, if I'm honest. It is, some days are better than others. There's an ebb and flow to when we get through hurdles and we're working on new projects, and then we get over them, and then I'm like, oh my God, I have some opportunity to breathe, and traveling and all that kind of stuff. I'm still figuring it out, but I'm fortunate that we only do one thing, and we're only really focusing on this one service that we offer. So we do one thing at a time, and I've really brought some team members on that I really trust and that are much smarter than me. Like, I am not opposed to hiring people that are way smarter than me and way better at what they do than I could ever be. So I put a lot of responsibility into their hands.
Yeah.
And that's helped me tremendously.
Yeah, I think it says something to, I mean, really anything, of just focusing on one thing. Like you're saying, I think that regardless of whether it's business or life, I feel like people kind of want to kind of take on all of these things instead of just focusing on one area and kind of not just perfecting it, because I mean nothing will ever kind of be perfection, right? I mean, but kind of concentrating enough on it, like you're saying, like as the times are changing or as things evolve, you can kind of really focus on it and see as things are changing. So I think that kind of speaks a lot to how you're running things. So that's awesome.
Thanks.
Before we kind of dive any further into WAG, so we'll come back to that. I know Riki, who will be back next week. Don't worry, folks. But you're not stuck with just me forever. I know she just got engaged. You recently got married, and I know she was wondering if you had any advice to offer, I guess, the either newly engaged or newly married folks out there.
If I had any advice, I'm really lucky. Like, my husband is the shit. Like, he's just so awesome and willing to work harder on our relationship than any relationship I've ever been in. What advice is, two pieces. One, everything in your relationship is equal. Like, there's no like you do the dishes X amount of times and he does the dishes X amount of times. Like, at the end of the day, like somehow it evens out. Like, there's no way to tally to you guys to be doing the same amount. Like, you cook more, he does the laundry more, you take out the garbage more. Like, the little things that bother you that can turn into bigger fights, just accept that somehow it's even, and it's just evens out in the end somehow. That has been like important for me. I'm like doing the dishes every day, or I mean, he's probably doing the dishes every day in this scenario, but and just accepting, that I'm evening it out somehow.
Yeah.
The next piece would be to, in any conflict that there is, to first go into it with a lens of like, you contributed something to it. So what is it that you brought to the situation, instead of trying to fix the other person? It's easier to, when you go into this is with anybody, but with any type of conflict, with taking accountability for your part, it like immediately softens the other person. They're like, oh, like they're saying sorry for their part, and now I can like be more vulnerable and admit to what I've done.
Yeah.
So that's my advice.
I love it. I love particularly the first part, because I feel like that's important. That it's not it will always equal 100%, but it won't ever necessarily be 50-50. So
right.
Get over it. So back a little bit to WAG. like I said, I am actually in week 2, starting week 3 of the program.
I'm so excited for you.
Yeah, I'm excited. I've dabbled obviously in a little bit of other stuff, and I have done some meal plans and stuff like that, and then I finally settled obviously on WAG, because as we talk about on here, coaches need coaches too. So and I particularly what drew me personally to it was that like kind of extra accountability factor of having like something like a weekly check-in and all of that stuff. So what do you think? I mean, because I mean, like you've said, you have quite a client load. And I mean, it's not just I've been obviously able to see kind of what's going on in there and see like the clients in there. And I mean, it's not just like say CrossFitters or weightlifters, or I mean, you've kind of attracted a very broad audience. So what do you think attributed to that? Because I mean, it's certainly awesome to kind of get that, like, I mean, paleo kind of stuck within, I guess, like the CrossFit community and sort of the stuff like that. So it's really cool to kind of see this expanding outside of there.
I'm glad you say that, because that's a great thing to notice. I'm hoping that that's what it's doing. I think it started like I work with a lot of games athletes, so that naturally brought the CrossFit community in, and I was a weightlifter, so that training in CrossFit gyms. So I think it just naturally started with a group of CrossFit, whether they're exercisers or athletes or whatever it is that they're doing. And then I think their mothers joined, or their fathers joined, you know, or their friends joined. And then that they told their friends, and those people, and then the further out you get, they don't necessarily do CrossFit anymore.
Yeah.
So I think that's what happened. But we do a lot of reposts or transformations of CrossFitters, but we try to focus a lot on what like quality of food content, or marketing about mindfulness, or marketing about stories. Like we give interviews of just regular people that are stewardesses on airplanes, or what just telling the story of anybody. And we don't really focus on just being for athletes. And I hope that that's coming across, that this is for anybody. But we still do get the question, most of our transformations, the second transformation, the person has a six-pack. So most people are like, I'm not going to be that person with the six-pack, so is this for me?
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that as we grow and we continue to reach more people, that we can get more and more of the stories of people that are not necessarily CrossFitters.
Well, I am not giving up hope on my six-pack.
Well, anyone can have a six-pack at a certain point. It's just maybe it's not going to be in 10 weeks for everybody if they're not training resistance training or high-intensity training.
Yeah, I probably got a little longer than that. So. But no, I think that definitely, I mean, I think it comes across, I mean, as somebody who, I like reading testimonials and that sort of stuff. Because, I mean, even if somebody has chosen CrossFit, I guess, as their means of exercise, I think that you guys have done a really good job in the storytelling to be able to kind of give that. Obviously, CrossFit is only an hour or two of somebody's day, unless they're a games athlete. Then it's a different scenario. But more times than not, it's just like their chosen activity. So, I mean, not a profession. So I think that you've done a very good job in that. And I definitely think that I'm sure is helping to kind of get the word out there outside of that umbrella. Where was I going with that? So obviously we've kind of talked about macros and the numbers. I mean, the numbers are numbers. And again, like we kind of talked about even a couple of weeks ago, I mean, really anybody can give you numbers. Whether or not they're good numbers is another thing. So, I mean, I know what I think sets WAG apart a little bit, but I'd like to see what you think, what in your mind sets it apart from just kind of any other get numbers out there. Or a calculator, I mean, an online calculator.
Yeah, I totally agree with that That's actually a struggle for some people that join the program, is because in week 1, really all you get is just the numbers, and you get like a PDF document explaining how to track your macros. But that's not where the magic of the program lies. So it does require a little bit of a commitment to get to week 2 or 3 or 4 to like realize, oh, this is not just about the numbers that they gave me. And they're like, oh, this is all I get. And it's not all you get. Like, there is more, but we need to, it's more of like a building of a relationship. And I even think that there's probably multiple sets of numbers that would work for the same person. Like, you could give a set of numbers that's slightly different than what I would give, or what I'm different. Like, all my coaches probably would give slight variations of the same set of numbers, because they take into account so many different aspects of your life, whether it's what you do for a living, what type of exercise you do, your age, your body composition, what your food preferences are, what your past diet history was. So I think there's many different kinds of numbers that could even work. It's more just consistency and compliance that's actually going to provide the results. And I think that's probably what sets us apart a little bit differently, is that we're really reading in between the lines of your life and your check-ins and your responses, and trying to get information out of you to try and bend the rules to fit your lifestyle. Or what are you struggling with? Or I have a client this morning who, she was going on vacation for this week, and she emailed me saying, hey, there's like no low-fat options here. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to stay under my fat. So I sent her a new set of macros that just adjusted, lowered the carbs a little bit, raised the fat a little bit, so that she could make this week work, and kept the calories the same. And it's just a week, and a diet that doesn't bend is going to break. So we're definitely all about bending the rules to get consistency and compliance, because that's the only way that you're going to see results.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, exactly. Because I mean, if you can't, that's what we constantly stress too on here is, I mean, it is flexible dieting for a reason. I mean, if you can't be, I mean, what is the point of being super rigid? Because I mean, you can go into anything and be like, I'm going to be the most rigid person ever.
And you're
it's
not.
Only gonna last, like, what? Like, seriously, like, and that's, I mean, we've talked about, like, kind of, Riki and I kind of had the same struggle with paleo. I mean, I a little bit more so than her, in the sense of, like, I mean, because I grew up, like, I did Weight Watchers at 14, so, like, I'm constantly in the mindset, like, if I'm, like, if I want to get it all in, I'm, like, so, like, if I ate one thing that was not paleo, it was game on until bedtime. Like, day's not paleo, let's make it happen. Like, competitive CrossFit mentality, like, let's go. So, and I mean, and that's, I think, like, what's great. I mean, you've got to learn how to be able to work within the rules, and if not, kind of make the rules work for your situation. Because, again, you want to go on vacation, you want to enjoy it. You don't want to be resentful of the diet plan or the lifestyle that you've chosen to adapt and not make it work, and just constantly, like, it's almost, I think of it almost like school, where you're, like, constantly just working towards the test and not ever, like, working towards, like, life experience.
And also being kind to yourself at the same time. Like, we're huge proponents on be kind to yourself. Like, the vacation example is a great one. You're on vacation. Your priority right now is probably not getting your six pack. Like, your priority, it is a priority, but it's probably not atop the list. It's probably just under having an amazing time with your family and friends, or whoever your loved ones who you're with, and experiencing a new culture, maybe some new food items. And that's okay. But once you've realized that that's the number one priority, when you're not making the most amount of progress during that week, you have to be okay with that, because you've decided that that's not the priority.
Yeah.
And you have the opportunity to make it the priority again eventually.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. Oh God, I keep losing it. That was so good.
There's editing, remember?
Yes. Oh damn, where did I want to go? Because I really wanted to, and then all I started thinking about was Daring Greatly.
We should definitely talk about Daring Greatly again, because I talk about it on every podcast.
I'll sneak it in at the end. So what I really found of value were the amount of the feedback that was given at the check-in. So I mean, again, I just sent week 1 this morning. Or week 2 this morning. So I had only week 1 come back to me. But I mean, again, WAG is not cheap. So I mean, I was really impressed though. Like it's kind of like one of those things that you finally like. It's like just pay for a better quality thing. And then you really see the value in it, because I mean, I was really, really impressed with the feedback after week 1. And just like I didn't even necessarily, I literally like kind of like hinted at a concern, like a fiber, and it was like, boom, here's all this information. And it was like, awesome. Like, it was like, I didn't even kind of like, I just kind of threw it out there, like, struggled with this a little bit. And like, so much information came back to me. And I just say that, and I appreciate that, because I mean, and I know we've all kind of been there where maybe we did do something of a little lower quality, or like, again, I reached out to somebody about meal plans at the very beginning of summer, just to kind of, I mean, I'm not a big meal plan fan in general, but I'm like, all right, you know what? You can't complain about something you've never done or tried, so let me do this. And it was 3 months, and after month 1, I'm like, this is rough. It's literally chicken, broccoli, and rice. And I'm like, this is not working. Can I, like, but before we do month 2, can I have a change? And it's like, well, this is working. And I'm like, I get that it's working, but I'm dying here, man. Like, ground turkey and chicken is fucking boring. Like, can I have something? And it just was like, again, like you said, like, the rules are not bending. This is working. And it's like, well, that's not working, because I can't stick to that. Like, it's not going to work. So what, where do you kind of, again, that this is somebody who's a coach that you've brought on and stuff like that. So how do you kind of get the coaches to kind of work on that with clients and really kind of give the feedback that they're giving?
We do. I mean, it's much better now than it ever has been. When we first started, it was a nightmare. And I look in retrospect and I'm like, wow, like we did some pretty crazy stuff. Like, I can't believe people stayed. I feel bad. And now we have, so Crosby's actually a newer coach, and he went through a pretty rigorous application process. So he went through the program himself. You can go to the results page. He's one of the many testimonials on the page. And he had to send in a video of himself so we could gauge some personality from there. I mean, it's remote, but I still want to get that feeling of passion, and a video is easier than, I mean, people can get someone else to write the email for them. Yeah. So there was the video aspect. Then we get them to do like a writing comprehension piece. And then they go through 4 phases of a training program, which includes reading and answering questions on a number of books. Then we give them like case studies from the worst clients ever to the best clients ever, and getting them to go through those scenarios, getting feedback from our head coach. And she guides them through all of this. And then on the last phase, it's like the worst scenarios, like terrible scenarios, and how would you deal with that as well. So they're going through all that. They've also been through the process, so they know they've been through the process for at least 3 months. So they've been through 12 check-ins, and they know what our system looks like from the user's end, and they've felt it. So they're going to already know what it feels like to send your check-in, and then you're refreshing your email endlessly for the next 24 hours until you get a response, and you're just like waiting. Maybe it comes now, maybe it comes now. Like every single coach has felt that for sure. And what it feels like to have a hard week, and how hard it is to admit that you've done that you've either gone over your macros, or you don't want to like let this person down, even though it's just an email, and that feeling is evident in everyone. And then they work really closely with our head coach, and she reads their responses. She guides them through. They also have to substitute for another coach. So, as a macro coach, if you go on vacation, who's going to check in with your people? Yeah.
Yeah, you're like wandering around the resort looking for Wi-Fi.
Yeah, exactly. And then you also, or you have to be like, hey, like, I'm not going to answer you for 2 weeks. And these people have paid, as you said, WAG's not cheap. So these people have paid a good amount of money, and I can't just like piece them for 2 weeks. Yeah. We actually did that once, and then every single person binged that week and was just like, sure. Oh my gosh, like
nobody's watching.
Yeah, exactly. So they had to supervise like the clients of another coach while they were on vacation, and then they were assessed on those interactions, and then they get their own clients. Nice. So they've been through a pretty intense process. Yeah. And also have access to a bunch of resources. Like for the past 2 years, we've been collecting all different kinds of responses for every single type of scenario. So you'll have like a binge scenario, and we probably have 10 to 15 different types of responses that can go towards that scenario, and the coach can take whatever they want, whatever resonates with their personality, and then add to it and send it to the client. So they have so much resources, and it's only getting more and more and more as we now do webinars, and I'm doing a master's program in January, so I'm going to probably take the master's program and turn it into a program for the coaches. So.
That's awesome, though. I mean, you can kind of tell, like, your own kind of entrepreneurial, like, kind of spirit, because you're like, okay, how can I change this and make this work for this situation, and kind of always evolving, which I appreciate, too, that it's not just, like, this is what it is, and, like, let's leave it and, like, start collecting dust and, like, again, kind of move on to the next thing. You're kind of putting all of your eggs in one basket, and it's great because then you can kind of evolve it appropriately.
Right, yeah, it's all about value. So we just want to keep... I mean, it is expensive, so we want you to join the program and feel like, oh, like, I get it. Like, I get why this is expensive. Like, over-deliver.
Yeah. And I think that another one of the pieces to that, and I think it's definitely been big for me, and I mean, it's so interesting kind of when you stop and think about it, because I was an English major, minored in journalism, so obviously, like, writing and stuff like that kind of not necessarily comes easily to me, but I'm more used to it. But you don't really kind of realize how much time you don't actually spend doing something until you actually sit down and do it. And that's one thing since starting WAG. I bought a journal, and there's a lot of kind of thought-provoking questions, if you will, like in your welcome email and even like in the first coach's email and stuff like that. So do you want to speak a little bit kind of I guess like the mindset piece? And just, I mean, even like, what's really kind of stuck to me, and I think it was in one of the very first emails, was like your non-negotiables. Like, I really, really liked that. So do you want to kind of talk to that piece of WAG? Because I think that holds a lot of value that people don't realize or even associate the value to that. Right,
sure. I think that we focus on that a lot because it is probably the most important piece of the entire process. So anybody who's looking to make some type of transformative physical journey probably comes from some aspect of, whether it's baggage, emotional baggage, shame, insecurity, like you're wanting to change something about your body, unless, you know, everybody has a little bit of that. So especially people that are looking to lose weight, I've been there, I'm there every single day. And, it's like, once you can work on that, it's going to make your life happier. And food is just a coping mechanism for everyone. Like, it's just a matter of extent. Like, that is, how much is it a coping mechanism for you? Like, a baby's born into the world and they start crying, and the first thing the mother thinks is my baby hungry? And then tries to feed it. So your first association between like emotions and being like you're coping with those emotions is food. Yeah. And then it's like the first thing that happens. So for some people that sticks, and for some people it doesn't. But if you can work on that, we don't just want to help you lose weight. Like, we don't just want to help you count your macros. We want to help you be a better person, be better at your job, be a better husband, be happier, train better. And I really believe that the answer to that is your mindset. I just recently went to a business conference, and there's a guy named Dan Sullivan who's like one of the best entrepreneur coaches in the world. And he gave a talk about how everybody operates at 100% of their mindset ceiling. So we're all operating at 100%. If you want to be better, you have to change your mindset. So once your mindset moves up, then you can operate. You have all the space to operate at a new 100%. Yeah. And it's the answer to like pretty much everything. So we work hard on finding new ways to do that or get that across.
Yeah, that's such an interesting way of putting it. It's almost like kind of like you only know what you know. Like and the only way to kind of know more is to learn more. So that's really kind of interesting way to look at it. How do you, so in coaching and from the side of doing this myself and being an impatient person, and also scrolling through the comments in the WAG group, how do you deal with the impatient people like myself that kind of want results now? Because I mean, probably the biggest thing that everybody that I can see, like that everybody's like, hey, I'm starting, tomorrow's day one, like just got my numbers, like all that stuff, like we're all just getting a way to introduce ourselves to everybody. Everybody's like comments are like, obviously good luck, but like kind of like stick with it, like be patient. Like, how do you get, I mean, because I mean, the world in general is like such an impatient, like toxic, like instant world these days. Which I mean, that's great, but it also has some major downfalls, especially like when it comes to like this mindset stuff. So how do you and how do your coaches deal with kind of that, like rein it in, like quit, like it doesn't need to happen tomorrow, like the end result is still going to be the end result?
I think we try and do it in a couple of different ways. One is the Facebook group, for sure. Like we would encourage someone who's impatient to go and post in the Facebook group and be like, hey, go, there's 2,700 people in there. Go post in the Facebook group and be like, hey, I haven't seen results for 8 weeks. You're going to get like 30 to 40 comments of people being like, I didn't see results for 12 weeks, or I didn't see like you are not alone. Yeah. I started tracking macros with like a macro coach. So I did something similar to Weight Watchers when I was 16. And then I started with an actual macro coach a couple years back, and I didn't see a single, and I was a weightlifter. I was training 9 times a week, 3 hours a day. Like I was training hard. I didn't see a pound of a weight loss until the 9th week.
Yeah.
And I was just like, and I understand that I am an exception. Like when I'm doing something, I'm doing it like 100%. Like I am tracking every single thing, weighing every single grain of rice. Like, and I didn't see a pound loss for 8 till my 9th week. So I would tell them to go to the Facebook group first, and just to feel like you're not alone, like other people have been into the same situation. And then those mindfulness practices that you're getting each week, those contribute to finding other markers of progress. Like it's not just about the number on the scale, and it's not just about the macros. Like what other successes have you made? Are you learning more about your food? Or did you track every single day? Like for some people, even just tracking every single day, regardless of whether you got even close to your macros or not, is a win.
Yeah.
Like that's a huge win. Did you hit a PR in the gym? Do you feel better in your clothes? Do you look better? Did you drink more water this week? And that was like a struggle for you at the beginning. There's so many different ways. Or are you finding more balance in your life? Are you realizing that you're not as stressed? Did you meditate every single day? Like there's just so many different things that we're trying to teach that it gives us a lot of opportunity to pull on other markers of progress. So you're not this wrapped up in this, like, it's not only an instant world, it's like a fact world. Like, yeah. I want the number on the scale to change. Like, it doesn't. Yeah. They don't even care if they look completely different. They just want that number to change.
Yeah.
And that seems like strange when you think about it logically, but it's a huge thing. So if you can point to other markers of progress, it can at least ease that anxiety a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I think it's really, I think obviously the mindset stuff, which is why I really wanted to touch on it during this podcast, really helps you to appreciate the journey, and the actual, like, overall personal development. 'Cause like you're saying, the value, you can get numbers from a calculator, you can get numbers from like Joe Schmo walking down the street. Like, but that's not where the value in kind of all of this that we're all putting out there and WAG and everything like that is where it's coming from. And I think that, like, again, I give you such praise for kind of developing that. And I think that obviously it comes like from you, and obviously working on developing yourself and then developing the coaches and the program and stuff like that is really kind of working towards that, like towards appreciating the journey, and it'll make kind of those results that much more.
Yeah. Well, the journey is where it's at. Like that is where it's at. I think you can probably talk to any single person who's ever won or accomplished anything successful, and they get there and they're like, oh, like,
yeah,
well, you know,
well, that's, I mean,
and
that's the problem, I think, with so many people with having like that number or like that, like a set, like goals are good, but I feel like sometimes they can be like, again, I'm so competitive that like, again, when I did Weight Watchers in the past, like, that's what it was about. Like, I'm not kidding. I literally waited in the same exact outfit. They probably thought I was like this strange kid that didn't own any other clothes. Like, like this kid shows up in the same outfit every week. Like, I hope he washes them at least or something. Like, but like, I was seriously like so crazy. But like, but then you get to that, like, okay, that's what I wanted to do, and then
is it over?
It was over.
And
like,
yeah.
And then it's like, oh shit. Like, and I feel like that's where most people get to like a maintenance phase and struggle, because it was like they're so set on that like one thing and not actually the journey itself. Because I mean, it's the journey is it. Like you're saying, like this is it. Like you may have a goal like on that journey, but like the journey is this. So
it's funny that that's what's actually making you feel good. Like, it's not the weight loss, and I mean, I'm sure that's validating. That's what's keeping you consistent, because it's motivating. But what's making you feel good and refreshed is your routine. Like your discipline to be consistent and compliant, like those non-negotiables, like just the feeling of you stuck to something, like you got into a routine and you've been being consistent, and that is what's making you feel good.
Yeah.
It's that the process is making you feel good. So once you like accept that, it's so much easier to be happy.
Agreed. So one last question, because we are nearing our time here. Again, pretty much on every podcast I've heard you on, and I've heard you on, I think, pretty much every one that you've done. So definitely like fangirling here today, which is why, again, rambling. But I'm always intrigued to know what you're reading, and I know, again, we kind of joked about this before we jumped on, that you've spoken about daring greatly, I'm pretty sure, on every podcast you've been on. But I want to know, do you any other things you're reading right now or doing right now that you'd kind of recommend? Because I love kind of my Audible list is like most of the things that you say you've read.
I am on a very long streak of daily meditation using the Headspace app. For people that think meditation is a waste of time and you can't stop your mind from wandering, and I will tell you right now, there's like 1 in every 3 times I meditate for 20 minutes, which is a long time. I will peek my eye open to like check how long's left. Like, that's how bad at meditation I am. Like, if people not watching the video, I'm doing air quotations. You cannot be bad at meditation. Everyone's mind wanders. That's the whole point. Like, it's just the practice of practicing. So I'm on a long streak, and there was one day where I got a call from like an accountant or something, and I'm in between countries at the moment, so it's kind of stressful. And I was just like, where I would normally be like, oh my God, my life is over, I'm going to jail. Like, that's where I would have normally gone. And I think the only thing I can attribute to that too is having those 20 minutes of daily meditation in the morning. And the app starts with 10 minutes, so don't get like freaked out by 20 minutes.
Okay.
And then I'm also reading The Way of the Superior Man right now.
Okay.
It's a book about how every person has like a masculine or feminine core. And therefore, like, your most optimal sexual partner would be somebody who has the opposite. So I'm feminine at my core. My husband is masculine at his core, and that's why we're attracted to each other. And then it talks about, like, the nuances of how to grow the feminine and how to grow the masculine. And, like, if like a feminine who is, like, high energy and emotional, and if I was paired with a masculine who is behaving more feminine, because we all have both in us, then it would force me to be a little more masculine. Like, I would compensate, so it, like, would make me
like
less
the chores.
Exactly. So it's really interesting. Like, there's so many moments in that book where I'm like, oh my God, like, that's totally me. Like, it talks about how somebody who has a feminine core, they'll say something and they mean it in that moment. Like, they're not lying. But then, like, 10 minutes later, they could say something completely opposite. But it's just because you're talking out of, like, your emotion versus you're not as logical as someone who's masculine. So it's like, let's move to Austin. And then when you get to Austin, I never wanted to live here. I'm like, you mean it when you're saying it, but it's not the actual issue. Like, that's not what you're upset about. It's a really good book. Other books, there's a book, I'm in the middle of 2 books. So the other book is The Last Safe Investment, and it's really good, by Brian Franklin, and he is a mentor of mine, and he talks about just, like, the life cycle of we work to save to one day, like, be happy and spend it all, and, like, that's not really how life works. So it talks about money, and I'm really bad with money, so it's good for me.
I'm at the end of chapter 1 of that book on Audible
really
right now. Yeah. So I started it last week. So usually the beginning of the week is, like, when I'm listening to all my podcasts in the car, and then by the end of the week, I usually move on to Audible. So I just started that last week.
Cool. Well, let me know how it is and what you like from it.
We'll have, like, a little book club meetup.
A friend of mine has, like, talked to me about doing an ebook club.
That is so fun.
Seriously.
You give very good book recommendations, so.
Thanks. I have a lot of people who give me very good book recommendations.
I just, like, hoard them all and then hope one day I'll get to them. So instead of saving money, like, I'm just buying books and just hoping. You need to, like, have your
Amazon already logged in with your credit card already in there, so it's easy to just, like, insta-buy.
Just the one click. Well, that's all I've got for you. I'm so honored that you had joined us on the podcast. I've been so excited in telling everybody that you're joining me. So I'm really excited that you came on. Is there anything else you want to share? As normal, we'll kind of put everything in our YouTube show notes. So if anybody's wondering where to find a D or anything like that, that'll all be there. I'm sure they all follow you, but
just in case. No, I think that we covered a lot of good stuff, and sweet. I am excited for people to hear it.
Yeah, me too. So awesome. Well, I really do appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.